feet to make it accessible. Also, there was insulation hanging down, all pipes and plumbing hanging down from 60 years worth of people just coming in and doing whatever they wanted. There was moisture on the ground, plastic. It was pretty, no one wanted to crawl underneath the house. So as you can see now, it's a lovely space. Yeah. It's workable and accessible. We took all of the old wires and plumbing that were hanging down, and we threw out the ones that were antiquated, and we rewired and plumbed everything into the joist cavities. The 2x6 joists, every 2 feet on center. And they're about, I think about 70 years old, as the original joists were. So then the next thing was to, after we had everything tucked in there, was to air seal the skin on the bottom, the floor on the bottom.
So if we wanted access, or if there's a leak, we'd have to actually open this up?
You would. You'd have to open it. This is going to be an instruction manual of this house for in the future. So when somebody comes in here, it'll be right hung up by the door. I figured you get an instruction manual with a cell phone or a car. You should get one with a house. So when a sub comes in here, they'll know how to treat this place. And the floor will be, I would prefer if they didn't even have shoes on when they came in here, because we're going to put plastic down. We don't want to puncture the moisture barrier on the floor. So back to this, though. This was after we got all the wires tucked in. We then try to have as few punctures in the floor cavity as possible. So there's one here.
The water line?
Huh?
For the water line?
That's water supply. There's some wires there we could not puncture, but we basically got rid of everything that punctured this air seal. And when that was done, then we put this OSB on, and as you can see, we taped the seams with a great trick I learned with this stuff called Pookie, which is duct sealer. Comes in a can, it's mastic, and basically I taped the seams with Pookie and sheetrock tape, and they are tight. They're really tight. And then on the edges, I foamed all of the edges to air seal the edges, rather than tape them. Taping would have been difficult. So theoretically, you could fill this floor up with water, and there would be a swimming pool up there. So what's radical is the air sealing of the bottom, and then that air seal continues out to the wall assemblies.
That's really cool. That's really neat. And is there insulation down here, or it's actually in?
It's
in the cab. Okay, so we don't even see it.
It's insulation. It was blown in cellulose, and it was what they call dense pack, which is 3.5 pounds per cubic foot. So that's 3.5 pounds of ground up newspaper stuffed into a cubic foot, and that's the amount of density.
And it's hanging, or it's blown. Oh, it's blown.
In between this, we put the floor cavity in first. Okay. And then we knocked holes in the side and then blew the insulation in from either end. And we made sure, once again, in all of our cavities, we took out everything that didn't need to be there. Blocking, wires, anything that didn't need to be there that would interfere with the insulation coming through or to interfere with the amount of insulation coming through. Like a 2x4 represents a heat loss compared to insulation. So we took out whatever we didn't need in the wall and floor assemblies.
Oh, that's great. Okay, Terry and I are in the back porch of the CLAM house here, and he's going to point out some really interesting things they've done with insulation, and we can actually see kind of before and after a little bit, like the difference. So Terry, tell us a little bit about this is advanced framed. It's
OHV framing, which is in the end, you get to greatly reduce the amount of actual wood you assemble a wall with, and you also increase the amount of insulation that winds up in the wall.
Okay.
And if you look at this, you can see that the studs are 2 feet on center.
That's a 24-inch, right?
Yeah, 24 inch on center. And then what's really different is that under every window, there's like a cripple underneath this 2x4, and there's a cripple there. And those are eliminated. The top plate is a sink.
What's in place of them?
Nothing. You you use metal clips.
Is it like clip?
Yeah. So But you don't really need all of that wood to hold up a single sill, on a window. It's tradition; it's always done that way, but it doesn't make sense really. Same on the header. Ordinarily, you put a 2x4 on either side to hold the header up. Don't really need it. You have plywood on the outside to shear it up. You have clips to hold it. So, in this one cavity alone, by 2 feet on center, you eliminate some 2x4s. You eliminate the cripples and the trimmers to hold up the sill and the header. On the rake wall there, but you can't see, there's no header over the window because the rake wall is basically non-bearing and you don't really need a header. But traditionally, guys put in 4x6s and 4x10s where they don't really need them. So if you understand the structural elements of it, you can really eliminate a lot of the wood that goes into it. I calculated the amount of 2x4s that went into this, small, very small, with the current framing compared to had we done a traditional framing, and there was a 23% reduction in 2x4s. Pretty impressive, pretty good. But what you also get is 1 inch of wood has an R value of 1. 1 inch of any other kind of insulation material has a higher R value. So the more wood you eliminate and the more insulation you get, the more value you get out of the wall cavity for insulation. And if you actually add it up in traditional framing, the amount of wood and junk that goes into a wall, you don't get an R13 or an R15 insulation value. You might get, out of an R15 rated, you might get an R10 or 11 because of all the studs and the wiring and stuff in it. So by engineer framing, you increase the volume of insulation, which improves obviously the performance of the house.
And this is, what kind of insulation did you end up using?
Well, this is cellulose. The cellulose is blown into all the other wall cavities from the outside after we put the OSB up. And in this room, it was netted. And then the guy punched little holes in it, and he's got this tube, this huge machine out there with a tube, and he's blowing in and filling this up with cellulose. You can see the cellulose is just newspaper. And the cellulose is recycled, non-toxic. It's got some boron in it. It's not fumacious or bad to breathe. And it's very, very fireproof, which is nice. And what I like about blow-in is that it surrounds everything in the wall. When you put in fiberglass, it's hard to cut around the wires and the outlets and the plumbing, but this stuff just packs in around everything. So again, you get a really good, insulation value. And over here, this is kind of cool because you can see the old, what it was. Now that's not too bad actually. That's pretty tight insulation there, but there's a gap there. There's a 2x4 back here. So the insulation, this used to be the outside of the house. So the heat loss in this one area would be pretty big. And then you can see where they ran wires through the heat loss. This insulation is good, and it starts to fail over here. Once again over here, the heat loss of this piece of wood is much greater than if it was solid insulation. This is 16 inches on center and very old studs, very old framing. And so it's kind of cool to see the old with the new in the same room. This is now an interior wall, so we don't care too much about insulation.